Magical girl turned knight. Because why not? You know that over-the-top 80s aesthetic where everything is shiny and glittery, and that, combined with the image quality, results in a bit of a fever dream? Yep, this is my goal here. I want to make a doll that is shamelessly pink and too much, while also looking dignified enough to look like a convincing knight. It started where everything starts, with clay. I use our dry clay, so I start with a lump, let it dry out, and then sculpt the face from there. It's easy to despair at this part and think that everything looks awful, because it kinda does. But we gotta let the refinement process work its magic. I add volume, remove volume, and do some detail work at this stage. The bases of the body were already sculpted and dry, so the next part was to remove the foil and straws inside the pieces in order to make them hollow for stringing. It is satisfying to get it all out, even if it takes a while. The straws are especially satisfying. Of course, a lot of sanding is involved in this process. I'm starting with a preliminary sanding of all the limbs, legs, torso, face. Here is where I did more detail work on the face as well, since I find it easier to refine it little by little and let my eyes adjust to the result. Nostrils, mouth, all the little details start to make the face look a little more believable. I sculpted the hands around a sturdy piece of wire so that they could hold the elastics in place securely, and then sanded them. That meant that the first round of sanding was done. And you know what that means? More sanding, of course. Sand, 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 and so much dust. But the good thing is that after all this sanding, I could finally start painting. I did a first coat of white, and then mixed a light skin tone base for the second coat. Everything was dry quickly, and I moved on to the face up. I wanted her face to look very airy and delicate, so I avoided darker colors, sketching the eyes with a light blue pencil and adding a little gray. With that base done, I added color to the cheeks and the mouth to give the face some more depth, which then allowed me to see where I was headed and make adjustments accordingly. And being truthful to my concept, I added shimmery, very shimmery eyeshadow to her eyelids. I think this color is gorgeous, and the glitter particles shine in very magical bluish tones. And then I did a layer of blue and gray paint to paint the irises, pupils, eyelashes, and eyebrows. Which means it was time for stringing. The moment of truth. Stringing makes me very nervous after all the long hours of work, but it goes more smoothly every time I do it, so that's progress. If you're wondering, yes, I use a piece of wire to guide the elastic through the pieces. It doesn't look very good, but I swear it's effective. Well, she's assembled and nicely movable. That's a win in my book. Now we will have to work with more clay for the armor. I covered the doll in cling film and, using a thin layer of clay, sculpted a very loose shape for the chest piece. When I say loose, I really do mean loose. This clay doesn't stick to things, so I did the first layer of everything, then allowed it to dry, to only then refine the shapes. You may be wondering here, why on earth did I use clay? And the answer is, I didn't have anything else. And I really wanted to build armor for this doll. Thermoplastics would have been easier. Yes, no access to those though. EVA foam, maybe, if I could find one thin enough. But I didn't have any of those, so of course I decided that my best course of action would be to rip my hair out while working with very thin clay to do some really fiddly pieces. To refine the rough shapes, I used a Dremel around the edges. This meant also adding volume where the shapes were a little too wonky, until things started to look at least armor-like-ish. And then I cut thin strips of clay to add to the edges of some of the pieces for a little more detail. This already changed the look of things. After this, I sanded the pieces a little more. Original state. First sanding. Second sanding. The chest piece still looked a little rough, but this is armor, you know. And despite being armor, it does need a bit of whimsy, the answer to which is obviously a big rhinestone heart. I embedded it on a layer of clay and shaped the clay around it. Looks a bit 90s superhero, but also magical girly, which was reassuring for my purposes. So, time to paint the armor. My first layer of paint was actually a pink that I thought was too cool and too saturated, so I did go with a different tone as the second coat. To give the pieces some extra depth, I brushed some dark pink around the edges, giving it some color variation. And then more of that glittery eyeshadow. And then I gave everything a coat of glossy varnish, and finally everything looked like it came out of some fairy queen's forge. I made a pink iridescent shirt as the base of the outfit. I wanted it to be very puffy, echoing Renaissance sleeves, because my armor pieces didn't cover the arms completely. This fabric was basically the embodiment of everything I had in my mind for this project, so I then cut a half-circle skirt out of velvet and trimmed the edges with pink lace. It didn't have the sort of drape I was looking for, so I split it in half and added more lace to the edges. I also glued the same rhinestone hearts I had embedded on the chest piece, but everything was still looking a little empty. So more lace, obviously. This was a more delicate lace, which I ruffled and added to the very edges of the original pink lace. That made it look very Rococo-esque, echoing the designs of the dresses of magical girls. Because of the sparkle factor, I added smaller, heart-shaped rhinestones to the corners. But I still wasn't happy with how the skirt was falling, so I sewed wire to the edges to make it possible to shape the skirt however I wanted, giving it some structure. That worked out very well, and all that was left was to add some stuffing to the inside of the skirt, making it super puffy. Since we're talking about sparkle, I added the teeny tiniest rhinestones around the heart on the chest piece. They look like little sparkly rivets. Then I made the stockings. If you've seen some of my other videos, you'll know that my tendency is always to make striped stockings. And this doll obviously had to have some. I made the shoes out of felt and the process was a confusing mess, so I didn't film it. But they're going to be there, trust me. For the sword, I sculpted it out of clay, because of course, giving it some swirly edges and embedding a heart onto the top. The hilt was just 2 pieces of clay twisted together. After painting the base, I covered the blade with some mordant and it was time for the silver foil. Brushing out the excess is always very satisfying. It makes up for the mess it makes, I guess. That's how I always think until I find a piece of foil somewhere unexpected, like in the kitchen. I added a bow and that was it. The last step was the hair. With my last doll, I did the hair first, and it got in the way of everything I did, so I thought it was best to leave it for later this time. The hair was acrylic yarn in white and pink, with the strands split and brushed. I decided to give her bangs and to roll up the tips of the hair to give it a swooshy appearance. Time to put everything together. Armor went on and was fastened with bows, and the sword was put in its place as if it was hanging from a belt of sorts. A little secret is that I had to come up with this because the chest piece broke somewhere along the process. It was not exactly a surprise because the clay was so thin, and when it's that thin, it's not incredibly resistant. But I needed to hang the sword from something, so I guess the clay gave me a solution. So now we can take a look at our hazy, magical fever dream. I hope you think she looks as cute as I think she does. This was a very cool project to make, but I think I will refrain from doing more clay armor in the future. If you like this and would like to see more, please subscribe to see my future projects. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye!